I worked security at a museum, and our exhibit drove people mad. I worked night security at the American Museum of Natural History in New York, and we had a new exhibit that scared the shit out of me. It started about a week ago. A new exhibit came in displaying unique oddities from human history. Basically, it covers strange things from all throughout history and all across the globe. We have books made from flesh, shrunken heads, death masks. You name it, the exhibit has it. However, it's a small idol, carved from black stone, that has caused the most fuss. My job consisted mainly of watching TV screens and occasionally doing a walkthrough of the museum to make sure everything is locked tight and no one is broken in. Most of the time, I just watched video game streams. It was during one of these rounds that I first saw the idol. It sat in a corner of the exhibit, almost as if they wanted to hide it, upon a small podium of wood and red cloth. I leaned in for a closer look. Upon inspection, I discovered that it depicted a strange creature. Its body was a large mass of flesh, covered in small spines and held aloft by many tentacles. The head was made up of many eyes, and its mouth was agape as if screaming. Ice ran down my spine and my head suddenly began to ache. An image burst into my mind unbidden. A mass of writhing tentacles and feelers. Yellow eyes opened all through the tangle and a voice crept into my head. N-B-R-Eth. I clenched my eyes shut and the vision faded. I stumbled away from the idol, collapsing to the floor. I crawled back and got to my feet. My head still ached, so I went back to the security room and popped a few aspirin. I put the whole thing down to stress and lack of sleep. The next night, when doing the changeover from day guards, during which they tell me of significant events during the day that might affect my shift, the guard Austin told me a man had attacked other patrons. I told him to show me the footage. He pulled it up on one of the screens and pointed. "See for yourself. Shit was crazy." I flopped down into the chair and hit play. The scene started with a man standing in front of the strange idol. My skin broke out in goosebumps and I shifted uncomfortably in the chair. The man stood before the idol, then suddenly fell to his knees. He began sobbing, then crying uncontrollably. Another patron knelt down next to him and placed a hand on his shoulder. The man spun around and wrapped his hands around patron's neck. He pushed him to the ground and squeezed. Other people tried to pull him off, but he wouldn't budge. Eventually, Austin came on screen, tased the guy. He fell off his victim and convulsed on the ground. It appeared that blood was running from his eyes. That night I was filled with anxiety. I kept thinking about the footage and found myself staring at the screen that showed the idol. There it was, just off to the side, tucked away in a corner. I wiped some sweat off my head and clicked the screen off. Later that night, while I was watching a live stream on Twitch, I heard a crash like a window breaking. I got to my feet, scooped up my flashlight, and headed out the room. I moved slowly, shining the light around at every exhibit. I came to the room with the idol and was about to go right past when I heard muttering. I crept around the corner and shone my light in the corner. A man knelt before the idol, head bowed, arms in his lap. He was muttering to himself and moving around strangely, almost swaying. I drew my taser and crept towards him. As I got closer, I began to make out some of his mumbling. I caught two words that made me freeze. "N-B-R-Eth." I felt my blood go cold and a lump rose up in my throat. I raised my taser. "What are you doing in here?" I demanded. "We're closed. I'm contacting the police." As I pulled out my phone, he clasped a knife in his right hand. His hands and arms were covered in blood from slashes across his wrists. He smiled up at me. His demeanor was calm, almost blissful. "Only the worthy may lay eyes upon the Lord of Dissonance. I have been found wanting." He raised the knife to his face and shoved it into his right eye. Blood and goo gushed from the socket as he moved to his left eye and repeated the act. His smile never faded. I turned and bolted to the security office. I snatched up the phone and dialed 911. I was aware of my cell phone in my hand, but there was no way I was staying near that man any longer than I had to. The ambulance showed up shortly after and carted the man away. I had called my boss and told him what happened. He arranged a replacement and sent me home. All that night I dreamed of ice and blood, of fog and a strange green mist. The man's words kept spinning around in my head. His smile haunted my dreams. I woke around 6 p.m. and made myself something to eat. I contemplated calling in sick. They would completely understand, but I needed the money. I showered, dressed, and headed into the museum. In the car park, I loaded my Glock and buried it in my backpack. I wasn't doing this shift unarmed. Austin told me that people had been acting strangely all day. An elderly couple had apparently stripped naked and began screaming at the top of their lungs. Another woman was found in the bathroom banging her head against the mirror, and a middle-aged man had attempted to break into the idol's case. And finally, an elderly man had started ranting about evil books and gods from between the layers of reality. He had screamed at Austin that the idol was evil and had to be buried. I sighed and took the keys from him. A violent storm rolled in around 11 p.m. and it was around midnight that they came. I saw them on the front entrance camera as they climbed the museum steps. A small group of hooded people. In tow behind them were others dressed in casual clothes. I swallowed hard and fetched the pistol from my bag. I heard a window smash and the sound of voices, not even trying to be quiet. I got to my feet and headed towards the idol room. I crept slowly along the hallways, leaving my flashlight off. The moon shone in through the windows, providing grim slashes of light to see by. I found the group in a circle. They had smashed the case and the idol sat in the center, surrounded by the casually clothed people who knelt. The hooded figures had their hands in the air and were chanting something in a language I can't even begin to repeat. The idol started to glow a strange green color, and the robed figures drew knives from within their robes. They placed the knives to the throats of the kneeling people. En Biereth, one of them said, and dragged the knife across. Blood poured out in a violent spray, coating the idol, which seemed to flicker and blur before my eyes. Lightning cracked and flashed. Images stung my mind. A deep green mist in which dark shapes moved and slithered. Giant tentacles waved lazily about. Pain seared my brain, and I dropped my pistol, clutching at my head. Another throat was cut. Eyes opened in the mist. Hundreds of glowing yellow monstrosities. I turned and ran. I couldn't stay there anymore. I left them to whatever horrors they were performing and bolted. I ran out into the storm and didn't stop until I reached my apartment. It's been 4 days since that night, and the images still haunt my every dream. I haven't been back to the museum since and have been ducking all their calls. I can't stop thinking about that idol. It's been the only thing I can focus on. I wonder if it's still there.